As a congenial place in which to write my book, I really wanted a better, older Europe, a city that had not been barbarized by the 20th century. Such a place must exist, I thought, outside the long cast of nostalgia. I wanted a city where, if you had sat at a table in the main square in 1905 and said, "By the end of the century, Europe will have changed from this world of czars and kaisers and archdukes and kings to a place of elected leaders where all men and women can vote," the inhabitants would have said, "That sounds like a good plan. Let's be careful how we put it into action." And if you had then said, "In fact, that transition can only be achieved by genocide across the century, tens and tens of millions dead, pogrom upon purge, slaughter upon Holocaust throughout Europe into Russia," the people of the city would have escorted you to their small but well-run lunatic asylum.
Sebastian Faulks is here now. What is it that keeps on bringing you back, tugging you back to the subject of war?
I didn't really go back to the subject of war as such. I went to look at the 20th century when it ended. That night in the Millennium Dome, I thought the millennium's just an arithmetical trick. What we should be thinking about here is the end of this century, which has been like no other, and has shown human beings, particularly in this continent, we in Europe who gave birth to the Renaissance, the Enlightenment, and who prided ourselves as empire ended as being in the forefront of science and learning and increasing welfare for all our people. And we made this political transition from that world of empire to this modern social democratic world at a cost of killing tens, perhaps hundreds of millions of our people. And it occurred to me then that was this through bad judgment, bad political judgments, bad faith, bad people, or was it that there is something fundamentally flawed with the human being, so that once the ability to kill people en masse became available to them, there was never really any doubt but that they would, of course, take it up. And this is something to do with the terrible instability of the human being. We are a genetic freak. We don't need to have written all Beethoven in order to have survived and outbred and out-eaten our competitors at the watercourse. We had this huge leap in evolution which has left us incredibly unstable. 1 in 100 of us is psychotic, is mad, doesn't work. And these are the themes behind the book as I've tried to thread them through the life of one man who lives a really fairly characteristic 20th century life.
So this is a revelation for you almost, that what this whole idea of humanity as being an inferior being rather than a superior being, or?
Yes, absolutely. And I think this is something that you begin to see during the First World War. You know, when was it that we first began to think that a single human life has no value? It must have been in 1915, 1916. I don't know when it was exactly, Verdun, whatever.
But presumably many centuries before that, with all the killing and the wars of 30 years.
I'm not trying to pretend this is the first time human beings had behaved in a barbaric and terrible way. Of course not, you know, the Goths, the Romans and so on. But I think that there was a sense in which we had to realign ourselves as against the natural world. And you see this very poignantly in the letters of the soldiers who comment on, you know, the rabbits and the rats finding their natural homes. And you see this great reassessment that comes out of the war literature.
Well, let me ask you, we're in a week where the Prime Minister has described the killing by drone of British citizens. Does that seem to you a relative success, that people aren't dying in their thousands and their millions in trenches?
It makes me quite uneasy that you would do on foreign ground what you wouldn't do at home. But of course you can't do what you would do at home because you can't go and arrest them. It's an extremely complicated thing, and I don't think that the end of the 20th century has provided any answers, but it has slightly shifted the nature of what is happening. And what's happened in a way is that religion has come back into the picture in a way that it wasn't there in 1914-18. These were manoeuvring power struggles between big power blocs who expected the others to declare war, so they had to declare war
So do you think this is, what we are in now, is a war of religion? It's not a war of territory? Is it a...
No, I'm sure it's largely territory, but there is a new religious element, and you see people beheading other people on the grounds that they are somehow authorized to do this by some invisible force. And that is almost insane behaviour, really.
And is it an obligation of writers like you to speak out against that?
I think it's an obligation, if you're a serious novelist, to try to look at the world and tell the stories of your individuals. And this is a love story, apart from anything else. It's about a man and a woman and children and parents. But I don't really enjoy reading novels that aren't plugged into a deeper historical knowledge. And if people don't have a historical background and a sense of where they come from, then we are doomed to repeat the failures of the 20th century.